All right, people. So we've been getting a lot of questions. I get a lot of questions on a daily basis, weekly basis, non-stop, in terms of what sort of things to look out for prior to bidding for a tender, especially when it comes to domiciliary care. So what we do is we help health and social care agencies and business owners to be able to scale and grow their business by helping them win tenders. Now, in doing so, we often are also responsible for the writing of the bids themselves. One of the most important things we do before writing the bid is to make sure we go through the criteria and the eligibility requirements to make sure that the client in question actually has what the buyer is looking for before even agreeing to write the tender, which is the most important thing, because once you start writing a tender, you should already have done the due diligence, the eligibility checks, understanding what documentations, everything that you need prior to writing a tender. So the writing part is probably the last thing you need to worry about. The most important thing is the preparation. Now, when it comes to preparation, there are typically five things. Five things you need to look into to make sure if this is a tender to consider or not. This is the very first step. I'm not even talking about the preparation of the documents and the requirements, etc., etc. I am just simply speaking about just to make sure you are eligible to even begin to prepare for that tender. So here's the five things you need to look out for first if you're bidding for a domiciliary care contract in England or Wales. Firstly, as domiciliary care and social care for adults is regulated by CQC, there's a regulatory body for adults and there's also a regulatory body for young people and children, which is Ofsted. So if it's under the age of 18, Ofsted regulates health and social care providers for children. If it's adults over the age of 18, CQC regulates social care providers for adults over the age of 18. Now, if you are going to be providing personal care is where CQC are predominantly involved for adults over the age of 18. If you are delivering domiciliary care, home care services, and you're providing personal care, medication, anything to do with the personal care of the adults, you need to first of all be CQC registered. Now, if you are checking through a tender and you're looking to apply for a particular tender or contract with a local authority, the first thing you need to do is actually look, do they need a registration with a regulatory body? Be it Ofsted, be it CQC, or if you're based in Wales, then it's the Care Inspector of Wales, which is the CIW. As long as you're going to be providing some form of personal care within this contract, you will most likely need a regulatory license. Your business will need a regulatory license with one of these bodies, unless you're providing an unregulated service, in which case you don't need a regulatory license. So this is the first thing you need to do. If you have one or not, it's still worth checking to make sure if the contract needs a providers who have one, you are ready. And this is something you can invest in. But if you're in the process of applying for one, and you're waiting for feedback or you're waiting for your interview date, whatever the scenario is, do not waste your time bidding for that, because most likely it's going to be a pass-fail requirement, which means at the point of evaluating your bid, if and when they eventually come across the fact that you don't have your CQC or your Ofsted, it's a straight fail. So you wasted days, hours, weeks, months, however long, bidding for that tender for it not to come past. So make sure you check for what regulatory body license is needed. Secondly, have a look at what regulatory body rating requirement is, what the rating requirement is. So often nowadays, especially for domiciliary care contracts within England, you need to be regulated by CQC and also have a rating. So meaning that CQC would have come to inspect you, and after the inspection, you'd be rated either inadequate, hopefully not, requires improvement, good, or outstanding. So one of those four. Now the bar typically is from, or there's obviously not rated. However, in this case, if you have been rated, it's one of those four. Now the bar typically is either a good rating or outstanding, but the baseline is for you to be rated good. So if you see that this tender or this contract for the domiciliary care framework requires a CQC registration, next thing look at, does it require a CQC rating? If you've not been inspected yet by CQC, you will also most likely fail at the evaluation round for not being rated or having a rating of good. This isn't necessarily something you can control because CQC would only do their rating periodically. There's a lot of organizations still waiting for their first inspections. Others have been inspected at requires improvement and they're waiting for their next inspection. So again, we can't always control when CQC comes to inspect us. We just have to essentially play the waiting game for the most part. Thirdly, another thing that you need to look into is the office requirements. A lot of frameworks now will require suppliers to have an office, which is a registered office, often registered with a regulatory body, but a registered office within the area where that framework is being published. For example, if the framework is going out in Manchester, most likely there will be a requirement for your registered office to be in Manchester, or they will stipulate a distance from the boundary of that council or that borough. Again, for example, it's either your office is within or in Manchester or 5, 10, 15 mile radius from Manchester City Council's boundary. So have a look to see what the requirement is from an office perspective. Because, for example, you might have an office that's 20 miles from the boundary, but maybe the requirement is only up to 10 miles. So that automatically disqualifies you. It literally could be margins. So make sure you have a look to see what the office requirement is for that domiciliary care bid before you start writing or even start preparing to write for that bid, so you don't end up wasting your time, wasting your money and your resources. Next is the financial accounts. Now, in many cases, you will also require an audited or unaudited accounts, meaning that your business needs to have been operating for at least 2 years for the most part. So you will need to submit, along with your applications, a 2-year accounts. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky for newer companies, less established businesses, so to speak, because when you're doing this, at the end of the day, if you're just a new provider, you will not have accounts to publish. So of course, this is where a lot of businesses struggle, because you've been CQC registered. Even sometimes you might have been inspected before your 2-year period. You might have been CQC inspected, got the rating of good. You've got the office there, but now you need accounts. But you've been delivering the service, you've got contracts, you've got everything else. But now the account is what they're going to hold you by, because you don't have that 2 years. So what they do is also do provide you quite often alternatives. So you need to know what alternatives are allowed for you to submit if you do not have 2 years published accounts for your business. There's always most likely going to be alternatives. So before you bid, make sure you're prepared financially for the economic and financial standing, because you will also need to pass that category in order to be successful on this framework and be one of the approved suppliers for that framework. Last but not least is the insurance requirements. This may seem like a small admin quick fix for a lot of people, but actually catches a lot of people off. Because most of the time, again, you need 3 insurances. This is typically your employer's liability, public liability, and professional indemnity. The reason it catches a lot of people off is for the coverage amount. Typically, again, it will say exactly what the coverage is needed. So if it's 10 million for public liability, 10 million for employees liability, or 3 million for professional indemnity, or 5 million for professional indemnity, or whatever the coverage is, they will most likely always, well, not most likely, they will always tell you what the minimum coverage needs to be for. So if you've got insurance that doesn't cover that specific amount and you blindly upload the insurances because you can just see that they want public liability, but you know you've got public liability, you just simply upload it, but you haven't actually looked to check what the coverage is, that will catch you out. And in most cases, that will be a fail. If you're lucky, they might come back and ask you to update your insurance or give them an updated insurance because they know it's a quick fix. But if you're not lucky, if you just happen to be one of the many unlucky customers who have unfortunately uploaded the wrong insurance documentation, then you failed your tender simply because of something that could have been an easy, quick admin fix.